My wedding was a trap set by my husband's family and ex, but I turned the aisle into a stage, and what I did left everyone in shock. You won't believe what happened to me on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. 3 women I trusted most in the world conspired to destroy my wedding dress and humiliate me in front of 200 guests, but they had no idea who they were messing with. My name is Amelia Carter, and I'm a 30-year-old fashion designer. I thought I had everything figured out. After 3 years of dating David Grant, we were finally getting married. His family seemed to love me. His mother, Eleanor, a 58-year-old retired teacher, would always hug me and call me sweetie, and his sister Vanessa, 35, who worked in HR, would text me about girls' nights and shopping trips. I felt like I was gaining not just a husband, but a whole new family. David and I had been through everything together. We met at a gallery opening where I was showcasing some of my fashion sketches, and he was there supporting a friend's art exhibition. He was different from the other guys I'd dated, thoughtful, supportive of my career, and he genuinely seemed to understand my creative vision. When he proposed last year at the same gallery where we met, I thought it was perfect. Everything felt like it was falling into place. Our relationship had been a whirlwind romance from the start. David worked as an architect, and we bonded over our shared love of creating beautiful things. He would spend hours listening to me talk about fabric textures, color palettes, and design concepts. I thought I had found my soulmate, someone who truly understood the artistic passion that drove me. We would spend weekends exploring art museums, attending fashion shows, and dreaming about our future together. The engagement period was magical, or so I thought. Eleanor insisted on helping with every detail of the wedding planning. She would call me daily with suggestions, offering to handle vendor communications and coordinate with the venue. At first, I was touched by her involvement. My own mother had passed away when I was in college, and having a mother figure who cared so much about my special day felt like a blessing. Vanessa was equally involved, organizing my bridal shower and bachelorette party. She seemed genuinely excited about gaining a sister-in-law, constantly telling me how happy she was that David had found someone who made him smile again. She would share stories about David's childhood, showing me photo albums and making me feel like I was truly becoming part of the family. The only strange thing was how his ex-wife Chloe Bennett kept appearing in our lives. She was a 33-year-old freelance photographer who claimed she was just visiting the old neighborhood whenever we'd run into her at the grocery store or coffee shop. David and Chloe had divorced 3 years ago. Right before David and I met, actually, and he always insisted it was completely over between them. She was too controlling, he'd tell me, always trying to manipulate situations to get her way. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? But looking back now, there were signs I should have noticed. The way Eleanor and Vanessa would stop talking when I entered a room. How they'd exchange these quick glances when I wasn't supposed to be looking. The way they'd suddenly change the subject if I asked about David's past or his relationship with Chloe. I thought they were just being protective of family privacy. I was so naive. There were other subtle things too. Eleanor would occasionally make comments about how artistic types could be unpredictable or high maintenance. Vanessa would joke about how David needed someone who could keep him grounded and not get too caught up in creative dramatics. At the time, I laughed these comments off, thinking they were just gentle teasing. Now I realize they were testing me, trying to gauge my reactions and find my weak spots. The week before the wedding, things felt a little off. Eleanor seemed more distant, and Vanessa was constantly on her phone, typing away and then quickly putting it down when I came near. When I asked if everything was okay, they'd just smile and say they were excited for the big day. "Just wedding stress, honey," Eleanor would say. "You know how it is." During that final week, I noticed they would have hushed conversations that would stop abruptly when I appeared. They claimed they were discussing surprise elements for the wedding, which I found sweet and thoughtful. Eleanor mentioned something about wanting to make sure everything was perfect for David's special day, and I appreciated what I thought was her dedication to making her son happy. I spent months designing my own wedding dress, a stunning ivory silk gown with hand-sewn beadwork that took me 4 months to complete. It was my masterpiece, something I'd dreamed of creating since I was a little girl playing dress-up. Every stitch was perfect, every bead placed with love. The dress featured a fitted bodice with intricate lacework, a flowing train that moved like water, and delicate pearl accents that caught the light beautifully. David had seen sketches but insisted on being surprised by the final result. "I want that moment when I see you walking down the aisle to be completely magical," he'd said. I had poured my heart and soul into that dress. It represented everything I stood for as a designer: elegance, craftsmanship, and attention to detail. I had sourced the silk from a specialty vendor in Italy, and each bead had been hand-selected for its perfect iridescence. The dress had been featured in a bridal magazine as an example of couture craftsmanship, and I had received inquiries from other brides wanting similar designs. The morning of the wedding, I was at the venue early, making sure everything was perfect. The flowers were arranged exactly as I'd envisioned, the lighting was soft and romantic, and my dress was hanging safely in the bridal suite. I felt like nothing could go wrong. The venue was a historic mansion with gorgeous gardens, and everything looked like a fairy tale setting. My bridesmaids were getting ready in the adjoining room, and the atmosphere was filled with excitement and anticipation. That's when I heard Eleanor's voice coming from the hallway outside the bridal suite. She was talking quietly, but something in her tone made me freeze. It wasn't the warm, grandmotherly voice I was used to hearing. There was something cold and calculating about it that made my skin crawl. I pressed my ear to the door and felt my blood run cold. "Are you sure the wine will stain permanently?" Eleanor was asking someone on the phone. "Good," she continued after a pause. "And Vanessa has the scissors ready just in case the wine doesn't work? We need this to look completely accidental." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Eleanor, the woman who had welcomed me into her family, who had helped me plan this wedding, who had called me her future daughter, was planning to sabotage my dress. "Chloe, you need to be ready with your part too," Eleanor continued. "When she's walking down the aisle, that's when you create the distraction. Pretend to trip or something, and that's when Vanessa will move in with the wine." I had to cover my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. Chloe was involved too. This wasn't just family disapproval, this was a coordinated attack involving David's ex-wife. The three women had been planning this together, probably for weeks or even months. I know, Eleanor was saying. "It seems cruel. But David needs to see that she's not the right fit for our family. Once she's humiliated in front of everyone, he'll realize his mistake. You two belong together, Chloe. This divorce was the biggest mistake he ever made." The phone call ended, and I heard Eleanor's footsteps moving away. I sat down on the floor of the bridal suite, my hands shaking uncontrollably. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Not on my wedding day. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. These women had spent months pretending to love me, helping me plan my wedding, all while secretly plotting to destroy the most important day of my life. But then the shock turned into something else. Anger. Pure, burning rage. I had spent 2 years being nothing but kind to these women. I had listened to Eleanor's stories about her teaching days for hours, nodding and asking follow-up questions even when I was exhausted from work. I had gone shopping with Vanessa, even when I was swamped with client deadlines, helping her pick out outfits and listening to her complain about her job. I had always been respectful and loving, trying so hard to be the perfect daughter-in-law and sister-in-law. And this was how they repaid me? By conspiring with David's ex-wife to humiliate me on the most important day of my life? I needed proof. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I quietly opened the door and saw Eleanor walking toward the main hall. I followed at a distance, staying behind pillars and in doorways, my heart hammering in my chest. She met up with Vanessa and Chloe near the back entrance of the venue. They thought they were being so clever, meeting where the guests couldn't see them. I pulled out my phone and started recording, my hands trembling but my resolve strengthening with every second. "Okay, so we're all clear on the plan?" Vanessa was saying. She looked nervous, fidgeting with something in her purse. "I still think this might be going too far." "It's not going too far," Chloe snapped, and I could see the jealousy and bitterness written all over her face. "She's not right for David. I've known him for 8 years. I know what he needs, and it's not some stuck-up fashion designer who thinks she's too good for his family." Stuck-up? I had never been anything but gracious to these people. I had bent over backwards to accommodate their preferences, changed wedding details to make them happy, and constantly sought their approval. "Chloe's right," Eleanor said firmly. "David made a mistake when he divorced her. He was confused, going through a midlife crisis or something. This Amelia girl is just a phase. Once he sees how she handles real pressure, real embarrassment, he'll come to his senses." "But what if he doesn't?" Vanessa asked, looking genuinely worried about the consequences. What if he gets angry at us? He'll thank us later, Eleanor replied with frightening confidence. Trust me, I know my son. He needs someone who can handle being part of this family, and clearly she can't. Look how she reacted when we tested her with little things. She got all flustered when I rearranged her wedding favors, and she nearly cried when you suggested changing the music. She's too sensitive. I realized they had been testing me all along. All those little suggestions and changes they'd made to my wedding plans. They weren't trying to help. They were trying to break me down, to find my breaking point so they could exploit it. Besides, Chloe added with a smugness that made my stomach turn, David and I have been texting. He's been having second thoughts. He just doesn't know how to get out of it without hurting her feelings. My heart stopped. David had been texting with Chloe? Having second thoughts about marrying me? Really? Vanessa sounded surprised. He hasn't said anything to me. He's embarrassed, Chloe explained. But he told me he misses what we had. He misses being with someone who understood him, someone who didn't constantly need validation for her art. This whole thing with Amelia, it's just him trying to prove he could move on, but deep down, he knows we belong together. I kept recording as they went over their plan in detail. Chloe would sit in the third row during the ceremony. When I was halfway down the aisle, she would accidentally trip and cause a commotion. During the confusion, Vanessa would approach me with a glass of red wine, pretending to offer congratulations, and then slip and throw it all over my dress. If that didn't work completely, Eleanor had scissors hidden in her purse to help clean up by cutting away the damaged parts of the dress. They had thought of everything. They wanted to humiliate me so thoroughly that David would have no choice but to call off the wedding, and I would be so mortified that I'd leave town and never come back. What if she tries to continue with the ceremony anyway? Vanessa asked. Look at her, Chloe laughed cruelly. She's one of those perfectionist types. If her precious dress is ruined, she'll fall apart completely. She'll probably run out crying, and David will follow her and realize what a mistake this all was. That's when I knew I had them. I had everything I needed. I walked back to the bridal suite, my mind racing. They thought they knew me? They thought I was some fragile little flower who would crumble under pressure? They had no idea who they were dealing with. I spent the next hour getting ready, but not in the way they expected. I did my makeup flawlessly, styled my hair perfectly, and put on my beautiful dress. But I also made copies of the recording, uploaded it to my cloud storage, and sent copies to my maid of honor with instructions to play it on the venue's sound system if I gave her the signal. I also did something else. I called my friend Marcus, who worked as a private investigator. I need you to dig up everything you can about David's relationship with his ex-wife Chloe, I told him. Text records, social media, everything. I need it within the hour. Amelia, it's your wedding day, Marcus said, concerned. What's going on? Just trust me on this. Please? Marcus had helped me with background checks on potential business partners before, so he knew I wouldn't ask unless it was serious. He also knew I wouldn't ask for something like this on a whim, especially not on my wedding day. 45 minutes later, Marcus sent me a file that made my blood boil. Screenshots of text messages between David and Chloe going back 6 months. Messages where David complained about me being too ambitious and not family-oriented enough. Messages where he talked about missing their simpler relationship. Messages where Chloe convinced him that I was just using him to climb socially. And the most damning one, from just 3 days ago, I know you're scared to call it off this close to the wedding. But it's better than making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. I'll always be here for you, David. Always. David had responded, I know. I just need to figure out how to do this without destroying Amelia completely. She doesn't deserve that. How noble of him. Planning to humiliate me but wanting to do it gently. There were dozens of other messages. David complaining that I worked too late, that I cared more about my designs than about family time. Chloe reassuring him that a real wife would prioritize her husband's needs over her career. Messages where they reminisced about their marriage. Carefully rewriting history to make it sound like some perfect love story that only ended because of outside pressure. I had been so blind. This wasn't just about Eleanor, Vanessa, and Chloe. David was in on it too. Maybe not the dress sabotage plan specifically, but he had been planning to leave me. He had been talking to his ex-wife behind my back for months, letting her poison his mind against me, letting her convince him that our relationship was a mistake. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked absolutely stunning. My dress was perfect, my makeup was flawless, and I had never felt more beautiful. I also had never felt more betrayed. But I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to be the victim in their twisted little drama. I took a deep breath and called my lawyer. Sarah, I need you to prepare a press release, I said. I'm about to do something that's going to get a lot of attention, and I want to control the narrative. Amelia, what are you talking about? Sarah asked, confused. Just trust me. I need you to draft something about standing up against family manipulation and betrayal. Make it professional but emotional. I'll send you some materials in about an hour. Next, I called my publicist. Yes, I had a publicist. My fashion career had been taking off, and I'd started getting media attention for my designs. Jessica, I need you to be ready for something big. I'm about to have a viral moment, and we need to spin it positively. Amelia, you're scaring me. What's going on? I'll explain everything later, just be ready. But I wasn't going to crumble. I wasn't going to run away crying. I was going to give them a wedding they'd never forget. The ceremony began exactly as planned. I could see Chloe sitting in the third row, just as they'd discussed. She was wearing a black dress, how appropriate, and kept checking her phone nervously. Eleanor and Vanessa were in the front row, both of them looking nervous but trying to smile. Vanessa kept adjusting something in her purse, probably the wine glass she planned to use for her accident. David was at the altar, looking handsome in his tuxedo, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes now that I knew what to look for. He looked pale and kept swallowing hard, like he was fighting nausea. Good, he should be nervous. I walked down the aisle slowly, savoring every step. This would be the last time these people would ever see me as the naive woman they thought they could manipulate and destroy. With each step, I felt my power growing. I wasn't the victim in this story. I was the hero who was about to save herself. The ceremony proceeded normally until we got to the part where the officiant asked if anyone had any objections. I could see Chloe tensing up, getting ready to create her distraction. Vanessa had positioned herself at the end of the pew, ready to spring into action with her wine glass. That's when I spoke up. Actually, I have something to say, I announced, turning to face the crowd of guests. David looked confused and panicked. Amelia, what are you doing? I'm giving the speech I should have given months ago, I said, taking the microphone from the surprised officiant. I looked out at the 200 guests. David's colleagues, our friends, family members who had traveled from across the country to be here. They all looked puzzled but attentive. I could see my own family and friends in the crowd, people who genuinely loved and supported me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here today to witness what I thought was going to be the beginning of my marriage to David Grant. However, I've just learned some very interesting information that I think you all should hear. The room was dead silent. I could see Eleanor's face going white. Vanessa was gripping her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Chloe looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. This morning I accidentally overheard a conversation between my future mother-in-law Eleanor, my future sister-in-law Vanessa, and David's ex-wife Chloe. They were discussing their plan to sabotage my wedding dress during the ceremony to humiliate me in front of all of you. Gasps erupted throughout the crowd. David's face went from confusion to horror. Amelia, what are you talking about? He said, but I could hear the panic in his voice. I'm talking about this, I said, signaling to my maid of honor, who started playing the recording through the sound system. Eleanor's voice filled the room. Are you sure the wine will stain permanently? Good. And Vanessa has the scissors ready just in case the wine doesn't work? We need this to look completely accidental. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. People were turning to stare at Eleanor, Vanessa, and Chloe, who all looked like they wanted to crawl under their chairs. But I wasn't done. And that's not all, I continued. I also discovered that David has been texting with Chloe for months, discussing his doubts about marrying me and his desire to get back together with her. I held up my phone and read some of the messages aloud. With each text, David's face grew paler, and the crowd grew more restless. So you see, I said, my voice steady and clear, this wedding was never meant to happen, not because I'm not good enough for this family, but because this family never intended to accept me in the first place. They wanted me to fail, to be humiliated, so that David could run back to his ex-wife without looking like the bad guy. I turned to look directly at David. Did you know about the dress plan specifically? No, I swear I didn't know about that, he said desperately. Amelia, please let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said. Your actions speak louder than any words could. You've been planning to leave me for months, David. You just didn't have the courage to do it honestly. I turned back to the crowd. I want to thank you all for being here today. Your presence means the world to me, even though this day didn't turn out as planned. I hope you'll stay and enjoy the reception. The food is already paid for and there's an open bar. Consider it a celebration of truth and integrity. I started to walk back down the aisle, but then I stopped and turned around one more time. Oh, and Eleanor, Vanessa, Chloe, you might want to check your social media. I took the liberty of posting the recording there too, along with the screenshots of David's text messages. I thought your friends and family should know what kind of people you really are. The last thing I heard as I walked out of that church was the sound of phones buzzing all throughout the crowd as people started checking their social media and sharing the story. I drove straight home, changed out of my wedding dress and packed a suitcase. By evening the story had gone viral. #WeddingDayRevenge was trending on Twitter, and my recording had been shared thousands of times on Facebook and Instagram. The story was picked up by major news outlets and I started getting interview requests from morning shows and podcasts. The fallout was swift and brutal, exactly as I had hoped. Eleanor became a pariah in her retirement community. The same women who used to invite her to book clubs and garden parties suddenly had no time for her. Parents from her former school heard the story and started a petition to have her volunteer position at the school library revoked. The principal called to inform her that her services were no longer needed. She had to delete all her social media accounts after being bombarded with messages calling her evil and manipulative. Her church asked her to step down from the Women's Auxiliary Committee. Vanessa had it even worse. Her company's HR department, ironic considering her job, launched an investigation into her conduct after the video went viral. They determined that someone who would orchestrate such a cruel scheme against a family member couldn't be trusted to handle sensitive employee situations. She was fired within a week, and her professional network dried up overnight. No other HR departments would hire her once they Googled her name. She had to move back in with Eleanor because she couldn't afford her apartment anymore. Chloe lost most of her photography clients when they realized she was the psycho ex-wife from the viral wedding video. Brides-to-be especially wanted nothing to do with her, afraid she might sabotage their weddings too. She had to move to another state to try to rebuild her business, but the internet never forgets. Every time a potential client Googled her name, the wedding video was the first result. She ended up having to change her professional name and start completely over. David tried to reach out to me for weeks, calling and texting, sending flowers, even showing up at my apartment. He claimed he never meant for things to go so far, that he was just confused and scared, that he really did love me, but I was done. I had seen who he really was when he thought I wasn't looking, and there was no coming back from that. The most satisfying part was watching him try to reconcile with Chloe after all this. Turns out she was only interested in him when he was unavailable. Once he was single and desperate to get back together, she suddenly lost interest. I don't want to be with someone who treated their fiancé so badly, she told him, according to mutual friends. The hypocrisy was stunning, but also perfect. David ended up alone, exactly as he deserved. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, I moved to San Francisco and opened my own boutique design studio called Integrity Designs. The viral video, as humiliating as the situation was, had actually brought me incredible opportunities. Women from all over the country reached out to me, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and asking me to design dresses for their weddings, divorces, or just because they wanted to feel powerful. My story became an inspiration to women who had been mistreated by their in-laws, or who had discovered their partner's infidelity. I started getting invited to speak at women's empowerment events about standing up for yourself and recognizing your worth. Magazine articles were written about me, calling me the designer who fought back. I went from being the woman who got revenge at her own wedding, to being the designer who stood up for herself and inspired thousands of others. My business exploded. I went from having a small client base to having a waiting list months long. Celebrities started wearing my designs, and I was featured in Vogue as one of the designers to watch. The wedding that was supposed to destroy me had actually launched me into a level of success I never could have imagined. A year later, I met James at a coffee shop near my studio. He was a graphic designer who had recently moved to the city, and he had no idea who I was or about my viral moment. We talked for hours about art, creativity, and life. When I finally told him my story, his response was perfect. "Those people were idiots to give up someone like you." James and I have been together for 2 years now, and he's everything David never was. He's supportive of my career, he celebrates my ambitions instead of trying to diminish them, and he would never ever conspire behind my back with anyone about anything. His family welcomed me with open arms from day one, real acceptance, not the fake kind I got from the grants. They love hearing about my work, they're proud of my success, and they treat me like the daughter they never had. We're getting married next month. This time, I'm having a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. People who have proven they genuinely care about my happiness. I'm wearing a dress I designed specifically for this wedding, inspired by my journey from betrayal to triumph. It's white with gold accents, symbolizing not just purity but also the strength I've found within myself. Looking back, I'm grateful for what happened, as crazy as that sounds. If Eleanor, Vanessa, and Chloe hadn't shown me their true colors, I might have married David and spent years in a family that never really accepted me. I might have wasted decades trying to win the approval of people who were never going to give it. I might have compromised my dreams and ambitions to fit into their narrow definition of what a wife should be. Instead, I learned one of the most valuable lessons of my life. You don't have to accept crumbs of affection from people who should be giving you the whole loaf. You don't have to stay in relationships where you're constantly proving your worth. And you definitely don't have to be polite to people who are actively working against your happiness. The night before my real wedding, I was looking through some old photos and I found one from the day David proposed. I looked so happy in that picture, but I also looked desperate for approval. I was so grateful that someone wanted to marry me that I was willing to overlook all the red flags, all the little signs that I wasn't truly valued. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone completely different. I see a woman who knows her worth, who won't settle for less than she deserves, and who isn't afraid to stand up for herself even when it's uncomfortable. I see someone who turned her worst day into her greatest triumph. I deleted that old photo. I don't need reminders of who I used to be before I learned to love myself enough to demand better. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering the true nature of the people around you before it's too late. I didn't lose a family that day in that church. I escaped from a trap that would have slowly suffocated my spirit over the years. And sometimes, the most beautiful thing you can do is walk away from people who were never worthy of you in the first place. My new life is everything I never knew I wanted, and I got here by refusing to accept anything less than the love and respect I deserve. That's a lesson I'll carry with me forever, and it's a message I share with every woman who hears my story. You are worth more than settling for people who don't see your value. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away.